begin. So this week we have Shavuos coming up. Shavuos, surprisingly, is not a very famous holiday. And I say surprisingly because, most people know about Rosh Hashanah, when Hashem gave the beginning of the Jewish year. Most people know about, I would say Yom Kippur is very popular. Then I would say Hanukkah, Pesach, but it doesn't seem to be so known or popular, this holiday of Shavuos. And the reason why it's surprising is because Shavuos is when the Jewish people got the Torah. Well, that's really surprising. We know about when the Jews left Egypt, and seemingly the whole reason of leaving Egypt, which was Passover when we left, the entire goal of leaving Egypt was for the purpose of getting the Torah. So it's very surprising. How come nobody knows about this holiday? Anyway, so we're going to learn about it and see what is so interesting about the holiday. So we'll see how far we get. So the first thing is, we said they were leaving Egypt, and we've talked about this in some of the, classes where we were learning about the Torah portion, that the Jewish people left Egypt. They were not on a very high spiritual level. They had been very influenced by the Egyptians and their lifestyle. And so they came out and they really needed to be purified and, but they came out and they were really excited. As soon as they got out of Egypt, they already said, let's count. We're so excited. We're going to be getting that Torah. 49 days later, they got the Torah. And during this 49 days, they were in a cleansing process where they were refining themselves to become better people, more connected to Hashem, more connected to God. And you can't just come and have this meeting with Hashem where he's going to descend on Mount Sinai and actually talk to the Jewish people. They heard the first two commandments directly from God. It was actually so intense that their souls left their bodies, and God had to bring them back to life. And then Moses ended up saying the next 8. But what we see here is that it was such a holy experience. Hashem himself literally came down on Mount Sinai and his essence was revealed. So they needed to be on a certain level to be able to have this experience. So what happened? They were refining themselves. They were refining their character. And it says that we have 7 emotional traits, which we've also discussed before. We have the trait of chesed, of kindness, then we have severity, we have compassion, we have victory, we have humility, we have bonding, we have creation. So we have all these different aspects within us where we can act with kindness, with severity, with compassion, with, bonding. This is how we are able to, some of them are a little more introspective, coming in within myself, and some are more about me sharing and giving with others. But these are all the attributes that we could use. Now, within these attributes, there's many different levels. So if you want to say in general, you could say, I'm just going to refine my kindness. But within kindness, there's the severity in kindness, there's the kindness in kindness, there's the compassion within kindness, there's the, discipline, which would be the severity aspect within kindness. There is the idea of having connection within kindness. There's so many different levels. So in order to properly go through all 7 of these emotional attributes, they had to spend 7 days on each, because they had to go through each of the 7 attributes within the other attributes. So if I'm doing chesed, I have to go through it in all 7 attributes within my kindness. And then I go through all 7 attributes within my severity / discipline, etc. And so that's why it took 49 days. They were going and they were refining themselves. Okay, so that's the background to our story. What's the story that I'm going to talk about? It says in the Medrash that the Jewish people go to sleep the night before Matan Torah, and they wake up late that next day. They are sleeping in. They're traveling the desert for 49 days, and it's the day finally they've been counting for, and God comes to Mount Sinai to meet the Jewish people. We compare it to a marriage. So imagine the groom comes and everybody is sleeping. Nobody's there. God says, I came, I called out, and there was no answer. I came, no one was there. I called out, nobody answered. And God was disappointed. God was upset. God wasn't happy with this. And so we have a very, very big question. Here are the Jews. They're counting for 49 days. They're so excited to get the Torah, and now they're sleeping. Do you have a question on this? Do you think something's a little strange about this? If you want to unmute yourself and share, do you have a question? Do you think something seems a little strange? Every day they're counting. They're so excited. They're counting down. Imagine you're counting to your wedding day. Comes the wedding day, sleeping. The groom comes, she's sleeping. Seems strange. If they're so excited, how could they just go to sleep and sleep in the day of what they've been counting down for, which we say is like the wedding day? How is that possible? So that is the question that we're trying to address. If they were so excited to receive the Torah and they had been counting down for days and days, how could they have just gone to sleep? How could they have just forgotten? I mean, imagine if the groom showed up to the wedding and the bride wasn't there. Oh, she forgot, she's sleeping in. I think the groom would start getting doubts, and he might even call off the wedding. And so what happens? The Jewish people are sleeping and God's not happy. And we're trying to figure out, how could they have forgotten? How could they have done this? And so the commentaries explain. Oh, and it describes this situation a little more. It says, God comes and no one's there to answer. And the Jews had such a sweet sleep, and the night was short and the bugs didn't bite. And what do you think that means when it's describing it like that? It's basically telling you that the night was sweet. It was a good, nice, sweet, really pleasurable sleep. It was short. When I say, oh, I had such a long night, what do I mean? I didn't get a good sleep. I kept on waking up. It was long. It was dry. When I have a short sleep, that means that it was, I felt like I just went to sleep. Like it was so good. It was so short. It was not interrupted. It was so that's how they're describing it. Hashem comes and the Jewish people, so what does it say? They had this really sweet sleep with no disturbances. The night was short, meaning it was undisturbed. It wasn't like a long, dragged out. I kept going to sleep, waking up, going to sleep, waking up like someone's sick and they're coughing and sick. It's like a long night because you're not sleeping well. Short, nice, and good. Now, where were they? They were in the desert. They were in the wilderness. And so it says the bugs didn't bite. That's why it was short and sweet. Because normally when you camp out, if you go camping, you got to bring a lot of bug spray, you get disturbed, you don't have a very good sleep. So this was like the whole time they're in the desert, and suddenly now they have this really amazing, great sleep. Really, really great sleep. And so what happens? They have such a good sleep that Hashem comes and they're just sleeping. He's like, what's going on? Where is everybody? I'm calling out, no one's answering. How could you just go to sleep the day we had this meeting set for so long? This is compared to our marriage. We're supposed to be getting married. We're supposed to be making this. I'm giving you the Torah, my most treasured gift. Where are you? So that's one. So we have two questions. The first question, I'll repeat, is how is it possible that the Jews went to sleep and forgot about this most exciting, auspicious day when they were counting and counting and counting? And not only were they counting and counting, counting, but when they came out, they were excited to get that Torah. And when they first came out, because if you start counting, it means you're excited. And when they came out, we mentioned that they were on a very low level. On a very low level. They were in the 49th level of impurity, and they were excited. So how much more so after they were refining themselves and becoming better people and becoming more in tune with godliness and with being a good person, they should want the Torah more as time goes on, because now, A, on a physical level, it's getting closer, so you're more excited. B, on a spiritual level, they should be way more excited, because when you're disconnected and impure, you don't really appreciate godliness and holiness so much. But now, when they've refined themselves and they're so much more in tune with godliness, they should really be appreciating this much more. So that's our question. What's going on here? How could they have forgotten? How could they just go to sleep? Seems so out of character, so out of place. And the second thing is, this Medrash explained that they had their sleep was sweet, and the night was short, and the bugs didn't bite. Why is it giving so many details? The details obviously have to symbolize something, because the Medrash concludes, and the Medrash says that the Jewish people nowadays, years and years later, we stay up and we learn Torah. It's a custom for men, not really women. I mean, women can definitely, learned late into the night, many years, depending on, what's going on, now with the children, it depends. But certainly when I was single or, youngly married or given classes, and it's a time we say we were sleeping when we should have been there for the Torah. So now we stay up and we learn Torah and we connect with the Torah in that way. So that lesson that we should be awake and study Torah the night of Shavuos, and even just be awake a whole year and really want to connect to the Torah, we don't need all those details. What do the details seem to add to that? Right? They had a good sleep. It was short. Who cares? They slept in. And that's why we stay up at night. So those are two questions. What do we learn from all these details? And how could the Jews have possibly just slept in if they were so excited to get the Torah? So the answer that we give is that they didn't forget. They weren't just sleeping in. They purposely slept longer. Why? Why would they purposely sleep longer? The answer is that when a person is in a body, when the soul, when the neshama is in a body, it's very limited. And it's limited to the limitations of the body. And so when my soul is in my body, I cannot achieve the same spiritual levels as when my soul is out of the body. So the Jewish people said, when we go to sleep, we're 1/60th dead. When we go to sleep, our neshama leaves our body and gets refreshed up in heaven, and then Hashem gives it back to us in the morning. So when I'm sleeping, I am very, very closely connected to Hashem. And my neshama is more connected to Hashem when I'm sleeping. So therefore, I am going, they said, we are going to go to sleep, where our neshama is going to cleave to Hashem and be connected to Hashem on a deeper level. And that will be good, because we're about to get the Torah. We're about to have such a spiritual experience. And so what do I want to do to have that spiritual experience? I want to be so connected to Hashem. I want to be so spiritually connected and in tune with Hashem. So that's what happened. And we see this is a true fact, that when a person sleeps, they're not limited by their body, and they could actually reach higher heights, and they could grasp Hashem, they could grasp God on a higher level. And what is one of the ways that we see this? It says that if there's someone who is toiling and toiling in Torah, if someone is toiling and toiling in Torah, he is working really hard in his Torah, and he's studying and studying and studying. And as much as he studies and as much as he toils and as much as he puts his brain to it, he cannot figure out this question in Torah. Can't figure it out. He's working. And he says if he toils that hard, then sometimes Hashem will grant him that in the middle of a sleep, he'll get to know it. And he wakes up in the morning and he has the answer. He worked and he looked in this book and that book, and he searched and he put this logic here and that logic there, and he went back and forth, could not figure it out. He goes to sleep, he wakes up, and in the morning, he has the answer. What happened? He really was not on the level to understand this, to comprehend this. But his body, his brain, couldn't really understand it. But then, when he went to sleep, what happened? When he went to sleep, his neshama left his body. So now he's not limited by his body. And his neshama up there was able to get the answer. And since his neshama got the answer, when it comes back to the body, it still has that answer. And therefore, he wakes up in the morning and he has the answer. So what does this show us? It shows us that, yes, one can attain much higher and more spiritual levels when they are sleeping. So they said, let's go to sleep. We're going to reach such a high spiritual level and we'll be prepared. So they were not sleeping out of forgetfulness, out of a lack, out of not being interested, not being excited. They were so excited that they said, how can we prepare? Let's go to sleep and become very spiritually connected to Hashem to prepare. Okay? And we see all the details in the story add to that, because when you say the sleep was sweet, you know, when you understand in Hebrew, the word for understanding and for taste is the same. Ta'am means reason, and ta'am means taste. Because when you understand something, when you have the reason for something, you understand it, then it's like you taste it. People's like, I got that. Like you get it and you like feel it inside of you. Right? Sometimes you're doing an action and you're just doing it externally. When you learn something and you understand it, it comes inside of you and you like really feel it. So it's like tasting something. And if in general understanding is taste, when we say sweet, it means like you really understood it, like deeply. So that's the idea. We're saying they were on the level they were learning and they deeply understood Torah. They were studying and studying and studying. And now from going to sleep, they were able to reach these really deep, deep level of understanding of Torah. and the night was short. When it's night out, what's the difference between the night and the day? What's the obvious apparent difference that you have between day and night? And I want to unmute themselves and tell me, what's the difference between day and night?
Light.
Light and dark. Exactly. Thank you, Nomi. When it is night, it is dark and there is no light and things are hidden. Nowadays we have lights. But if I wouldn't have my electricity, like after a hurricane, right? We've experienced that where the street lights were out, our house lights were out. When it became night, it was dark and things were hidden and we could not see what was really going on. So what's hidden? When we say darkness, Hashem. Hashem is hidden. And that's what we refer to darkness, because the real truth is Hashem and godliness. And when we say it's dark, we're saying that Hashem is hidden. And so they said, because we studied Torah so much and it was so sweet, we had such a deep, deep understanding of the Torah. Therefore, what was happening? The night was short. The darkness, the concealment of God, where we couldn't see God, was small. God was barely hidden. That's the level they were on. They were on such a high level, they went to sleep and they connected, and their understanding was so deep. And the concealment of God was so little. God was so revealed to the extent that they even affected the things around them, that even the bugs didn't bite them. The bugs, the mosquitoes didn't bite, saying that not only was I understanding Torah deeply and that there wasn't a lot of darkness for me, but I even affected that the world around me, the darkness around me didn't even affect me. I affected that the mosquitoes didn't bite. It's one level where you yourself reach a high level. And a deeper level is when you even affect your surroundings. So that's the level the Jews were on. Such a deep understanding, so little concealment of God, affecting the world around them. That's why we know those details, because we need to show they weren't being lax. They weren't forgetting about Hashem. On the contrary, this was their preparation. They purposely went to sleep so they could reach that high level of Torah, so they can make the revelation of Hashem greater and affect the world around them. And so we've answered our questions. Okay, we seem good. We know I had all the details. We know that they didn't forget. How could they forget? They didn't forget. They were so spiritual. They should be more spiritual. They should want Torah more. They did. They were preparing. They were connecting with their neshama and trying to disconnect from their body and go up. So now, if that's the case, we're left with another very strong question. And that is, why was Hashem unhappy? Why did Hashem not like that? How come he came and he said, I'm calling out and no one's answering, and he was disappointed? If they were just trying to reach such a high spiritual level, why wasn't he happy with it? And so the answer is that we have to know first, what's Matan Torah? What's the giving of Torah all about? And then we can answer this question. So the giving of Matan Torah was to enable us to do mitzvahs, to enable us to do good deeds, to enable us to serve Hashem through fulfilling his will, such as keeping Shavuos, such as dressing modestly, such as eating kosher, such as giving our children Jewish education, such as eating matzah on Pesach, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Hearing the Ten Commandments on Shavuos, right? And the list just continues and continues and continues. But that's what happened by Matan Torah. God enabled us to do the mitzvahs. Now, what do you need to do mitzvahs? You can't just be a soul. Who could do mitzvahs? Only souls and bodies. The angels up there in heaven, they cannot do the mitzvahs. They're not able to. So what do we learn from this? That the whole purpose of Matan Torah was to synthesize the physical and the spiritual. It says that before Matan Torah, there was a decree in the world that physical and spiritual could not mix. As we say in Psalms and Tehillim, Hashemayim Shemayim Hashem, the heavens are for Hashem. The Aretz, and the land, Nasan Livnei Adam, he gave to the human. So, what are we saying over here? Before the Torah was given, there was a decree that physical and spiritual couldn't mix. And even when our forefathers, such as Yaakov, did a mitzvah, or Abraham, or Isaac, they did not make an impression on the physical object they used. It was able to be thrown out. Now, if someone has, for example, a pair of tzitzis, and a tallis, and you don't wear it anymore, you're not supposed to throw it out. You're supposed to put it in, bury it. We call it shamus. So now, after the giving of the Torah, the physical objects become permeated with godliness. Before, the physical and the spiritual couldn't mix. So the physical object couldn't be permeated with godliness. So that's what Matan Torah is all about. That's what the giving of the Torah is all about. The giving of the Torah is all about bringing the essence of God into this world, bringing godliness into physical objects. So now we could understand what their problem was, what their mistake was. So even though they had wonderful intentions, and they was coming from a great place, and they did something very nice and very good, they wanted to spiritually connect to God, leave their bodies and connect, understand the secrets. But Hashem says, you're coming to the giving of the Torah, which is all about giving you the mitzvahs that you could do physically, that you'll be able to now synthesize the physical and the spiritual. You'll take that candle, light it for Shabbos, and on that candle will become holiness. You're working in your body now. Your body becomes holy with all the mitzvahs that you do. So, what do we see from here? That the accomplishment of Matan Torah is to synthesize the physical and the spiritual. So now, if you want to prepare for something, you need to prepare accordingly. For example, let's just say I want to run the marathon, and I want to run 26 miles. And I want to prepare for that. So what would be the logical way to prepare for that? What might I do? Exercise, run, right? Jog, run, walk, prepare. But what if I decided instead I'm just going to read a lot of science books? Reading science books is great. You're going to do, you'll know a lot, you'll gain a lot, but it's not going to help you with the marathon. And what if vice versa? What if I was taking my bar exam, and instead of studying, I went running every day? Wouldn't help me. If I want to pass an exam, right, then I need to study for the exam. That's going to take my brain. I need to sharpen my brain. I need to do that. So I want to, I'm going to take the bar exam. I'm going to study all those books to make sure I know it well. Running could be a side thing, like, I'll run and then I'll have a more, I'll feel more refreshed to be able to study. But if I just run, I'm not going to do very well in that exam. And what if the opposite? I'm running, and instead of running every day, I'm studying for the exam. So studying for the exam is not going to help me run, and running is not going to help me study for the exam. Each preparation has to fit your goal. So if the whole idea of Matan Torah, the goal was to mix the physical and spiritual, then how do you prepare? By working with the physical and spiritual. But what did they do? They said, we just want to be spiritual. That's very nice. But if you're preparing for the giving of the Torah, which is synthesizing the physical and the spiritual, then that's the way you should prepare. So you shouldn't run away from your physical body, but you should embrace it, and you should use it to serve Hashem. So that's what we learned. We learned that even though they had good intention and they were trying to reach a very high spiritual state, that was very nice. That was very good. But no, that's not the goal. That's not reaching your goal. You are working towards the giving of the Torah, which is synthesizing the physical and the spiritual, bringing holiness into every physical thing I do. Then you need to do that now. You need to. So what should the Jews have done? They should have been trying to work and make themselves holy within their bodies, not out of their bodies. And this is a very tremendous lesson for us because we, a lot of times, can get caught up. It could go either way. But a lot of times people say like, oh, I'll just learn and be all spiritual. Why should I get involved with the physical? Who cares? Does God really care about that? Why should I help the person who doesn't know anything? Let me just lock myself up in a room and learn and learn and learn and learn and learn and pray and pray and pray and learn. And who cares about all the other people? No, that's not what we learn from here. We learn from here that you don't just lock yourself up and say, I'm going to learn. That's what the Jews did. But I'm on the level of sweet. Shavuos is sweet. I'm on the level where I know so much Torah that it's sweet to me. It's so much a part of me. And for me, the night is short. There's so little concealment to godliness. There's such a great revelation of godliness. And even the world around me is not affecting me. So you know what? Why should I get involved with that big bad world out there? I'll just sit here and study, study, study. And comes along this message from the giving of the Torah and says, no, absolutely not. You missed the boat. Hashem says, I'm calling, you're not answering. You're supposed to be in your physical body. What you could do with your physical body is much greater than what you could do out of your physical body. So that's the idea, that we really have this lesson that we're not supposed to lock ourselves up and just think only about me and only about my spirituality. We're supposed to work with the physical world, focus on the physical mitzvahs, and also focus on helping other people. If you know A and B, Aleph and Beis, and the other person only knows Aleph, teach them Beis. Whatever you learn, you could say there's people that are more knowledgeable than me. It doesn't matter. That's what we learn from here. That you don't lock yourself up in your own spiritual bubble. You need to go out, speak to people, teach people. Everyone teaches in different ways. You know, some by example, some by giving an actual lecture. But that's not the issue. That's not the point. The point is, wherever you are, you're always trying to teach. You're always trying to impart good messages. You care about the other person and say, well, whatever, I'm good. I keep Shabbos. Who cares if the other person does? No, we're all one body, and there's just different organs, and we're all put together, and we're really one. So if one organ starts hurting the other organ, which is like one Jew hurting another Jew, that's the whole reason the Holy Temple was destroyed. And that's what we have to work so hard. We really, really, really want Mashiach so badly. And so we have to care about the other person. And it also fits in because it says, right before the Jews got the Torah, it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, and he rested there. And it's talking about the Jewish people. And the question is, why isn't it in plural? Why isn't it and they rested? Why does it say he rested if it's referring to all of the Jewish people? And the answer is because the prerequisite to Torah is Vayichan. He rested. We're all like one. That's our prerequisite to learning Torah. That's our prerequisite to getting Torah. So you can't just say, well, I'm going to lock myself up and I'm going to learn and learn and learn and learn. And there's other people out there who don't know anything and they're not going to learn. And the Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers, reassures us and says, Umi talmidai yoser mikulam. From my students, more than anyone. Meaning, from my students, I have learned the most. more than anyone else. So we shouldn't be worried, well, I could really attain such heights if I would just, focus on myself and not focus on others. That's not the way we are. We're all one unit, part of Hashem. And so it should bother me if my friend doesn't have what she needs, physically and spiritually. So that's the lesson that we learn. Don't lock yourself up and say, this world is crazy. Utilize everything in the world to serve Hashem and care about every other person like it was yourself and teach them. So may we be able to really internalize this and make sure that every opportunity, most of our life is physical. All our physical things should be imbued with holiness. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about another aspect of Shavuos, and that is connected to this. And that is that the Medrash explains, different Medrash, that when Moshe went up on high, the Jewish people, the Malachim, Moshe went himself up to heaven. And the Malachim, the angels, said to Hashem, who is this human? Why is he here? Why is there a human here? And Hashem said, to get the Torah. And they said, what do you mean? Why is he getting the Torah? Why aren't we? And so Moshe responded and he said, did you go down to Egypt? It says, I am the God that took you out of Egypt. That doesn't apply to you. Don't have other gods? You're not living amongst people who serve idol worship and have a temptation to go and do that. That doesn't apply to you. And he went on further. Don't be jealous. And he, don't commit adultery, etc. And he went on and on. And he said all of those, he went on to, elaborate, like it says, honor your parents. Do you have parents, etc.? Do you have a mother? Do you have a father? Do you have an evil inclination? Like, this doesn't apply to you. What are you? So it's explained that the angels didn't just say, oh, we want the Torah. The angels, they had a claim. They said, there's a law in Torah that if you're the neighbor, you get first dibs. If you're the neighbor, if I have a neighbor that lives next door to me, and I want to sell my house, then I have to first offer it to the neighbor before I give it to someone else. They said, hey, we live in heaven. We're the neighbors to Hashem. So we really actually deserve the Torah. So why are you giving it to Moshe? There is a very long, intricate debate that goes on here, giving reasons why the Jews can learn it and why, the angels, they say they deserve it, but the Jews deserve it because they're also neighbors, and we prove that back and forth, but we only have, 3-4 minutes now. So I'm just going to go to the end, the final conclusion of the debate. But in a nutshell, basically what we're saying is that why did the Jewish people deserve the Torah more than the angels? What was Moses really saying? He was saying, you don't live down here in this physical world. Down here in this physical world, sorry, I was just muting to make sure. Okay, so we don't have that music background. So what was he saying? Back to what I was saying. He was saying that the Torah was given down here in this physical world, and everything that's written in it is, like we said before, these physical things. But what he was bringing out is he was saying, you need the physical world because So how was that an answer? They said, we're the neighbor. We deserve it. So he said, there's an exception to the rule. There's a bunch of exceptions, but we're going to go through the final one. The exception is that if somebody wants, the neighbor wants the home just to plant, just for extras, and the other person needs a home to live in, then the non-neighbor gets it. So the neighbor only takes precedence if they both want it for a home to live in. If the neighbor wants it just to plant, and the other person wants it to live it as a home, then the other person gets it. So he says, we being in this world, we're creating a home for Hashem. That's the goal of this entire world. How do we create a home? A home is where someone's essence is revealed. Where is Hashem's essence revealed? Where we bring holiness into the physical things. Because God said, I want a home down in the physical world. That's where I want it. So the only way to build a home is by taking physical things and making them spiritual. Taking something that feels like an entity of its own and turning it into something that's totally subservient to God. Which is like taking something, right? It feels like a something, like it's a candle. It feels like it, but really, we make it holy. It's really just a part of God. So you take something and you make it into nothing. And that's hinted to in the words that Moses said, you have a mother and a father. Because the closest, only Hashem could create nothing and make it into something. Only he could switch over from something to nothing. We just take wood and I make it into a desk. I'm just taking something and make it into a different something. I'm not really creating something from scratch. But the closest thing we have to creating something from scratch, which is like something from nothing, is childbirth. And he was saying to the angels, you're a mother and father. You can't take physical things and making them into something spiritual. You can't take a something and make it into nothing, meaning that it feels like nothing, that it's totally subservient to God, that it doesn't even feel its own identity. That is something only we have down here. But he says, don't worry, because guess what? It's like a lever. If you take a lever and you have a 10-story building and you put it underneath the 5th floor, what's going to go up? Only the 5 to 10, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But if you take the lever and you put it on the bottom, underneath the 1st floor, all 10 go up. So if you would make that home for God up there in heaven, which you can't do because you don't have physical things, but then we would be left out. The whole world wouldn't be elevated. But because we're the lowest world, the physical world, and we put that lever, we elevate the bottom world, automatically everything above it rises also. So we give not only ourselves, but we also give the angels the gift of having the Torah. And so we see what a great privilege it is being humans, that we could do what angels can't do. And we're able, every mitzvah you do one thing, you visit someone who's sick, you light the candles for Shabbos, whatever we do, we are elevating all the worlds, and we are creating that home for Hashem. So may we all receive the Torah, because every year, as we spoke a different class, every year we renew that getting of the Torah, because we're at a different stage in life and we get to feel it at where we are. May we all re-receive the Torah with happiness and with a good heart. Have a wonderful day and a happy Shavuos.
Happy Shavuos. Thank you. Bye, Devorah Leah.
Bye.